Are we rolling? Yeah. Okay, so you called this proposal the Fool and the Imaginal Realm. I guess we could begin by maybe asking, who is this fool you are speaking of? The fool in this context, from one angle, is me, because I am the one who'll be doing the show. I will be the player in a temporal piece of us going a too quick. The fool in this context, from one angle, is me. I am the one who'll be doing the show. I will be the player in a temporal piece of art, being that it begins and ends, it moves through time, just like this film. You know what I mean? The term fool has been chosen because of my previous experiences training with people like Jonathan Kay and the archetypal structure which has emerged in my practice, both of which we will return to in more detail. Fool gives a sense of tongue-in-cheek, right? Clown, trickster, a character that has no fixed history and can operate forever on the peripheries and slip into any role as needed. Quote, attempts to categorise are doomed, since it is a fundamental part of the makeup of a fool to defy categories. He lures us toward definition, only to vanish at the moment when the analyst believes she is approaching an understanding. In Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot, we have two characters that are both embodying the function of the fool in different ways, or within a play world that creates folly of existence itself. Joel Schechter, while making visual links between Charlie Chaplin's Tramp and Beckett's Vladimir and Estragon, also connects them with a notion of spontaneous performance as character. Vladimir and Estragon lack a history even when they are on stage. They attempt to create personal histories or recall them throughout the performance, and their entire existence on stage resembles the moment Chaplin describes by saying, "By the time I walked on stage, he was fully born." Beckett's tramps live only on stage, in the present tense, creating identities and then losing them from moment to moment. Fool also evokes notions of the jester, the troubadour, the bard. When I was a child, my father, a very tricky fella himself, painted this on the wall of our hallway. Where is it? I was around 3 years old. So this figure, this painting, has understandably had a very large imprint on me nature. Look how happy he is. Oi, oi. Jingle bells, Batman spells, he juggles the past away. The artefact, which is a print of a digital photograph of a painting on the wall, depicts how this jester, this spirit of folly, plays with the very concepts and notions of time that we have. Time. Each ball contains the name for our Greco-Roman... Well, bloody hell. Are you alright? Hang on. Refresh for our Greco-Roman construct of time. Past, memory, present, I am. Future, question mark, with an X. We, you, all of us, have absorbed this threefold concept culturally, but as Gveldolf Gundarsson points out, there are other options, such as in the views of ancient Teutonic peoples. He says, the Germanic time sense is not threefold, but twofold. Time is divided into that which is, a concept encompassing everything that has ever happened, not a linear progression, but as a unity of interwoven layers, and that which is becoming, the active changing of the present as it grows from the patterns set in that which is. The jester, oi oi, gives liberty to play with it all. Liberty, especially if it has become fixed and sacred. Everything is material for play. Oi oi, even the deep down, horrible, little, scarred, sacred, scared little secrets we keep. Yeah, play with it. So, are you a musician, poet, actor? How do you define yourself in your practice as this undefinable fool? Huh?
Well, There's a little story from the Turba Philosophorum, an alchemical text supposedly written in 900 AD that goes a little something like this. Know ye that we have many names to it, which are all true, an example of which, for those that possess understanding, is to be traced in corn that is being ground. For after grinding it is called by another name, and after it has been passed through the sieve, and the various substances have been separated one from another, each of these has its own name, and yet fundamentally there is but one name, to wit, corn, from which many names are distinguished. I mean, whilst this is alluding to what some people may call God, the stream of human arts, I propose, is like this. I mean, brackets, maybe that is God, close brackets. Creative impulse, split into many glorious offshoots, into many names. However, I choose to go with the name for this stream, poetry, and the person doing it, poet. The creative individual who makes form by combining images and expressed patterns. This is the way of creative discipline, right? Rendering form out of energy. Could be visual art, music, words, dance, architecture. Alright, let's get into it. There is a part of my practice that I call journeying that sprang out of a desire, a need to have psychedelic experiences without destroying my life through drugs anymore. Essentially, I bang a drum, this drum. Yeah, boy. This is Bodar spirit. So, I bang on that drum there, golden stag, and go into a story world, a dream time as the Aboriginal Australians might say. In one of these journeys, I asked the question, what is poetry? I saw space, vast, and then lights and colours began to pull together through movement, heat, magnetism, intensity. The sun, born, planets. It's like coagulating thing was occurring. And whilst this was happening, a voice said, poetry is the force that gives form to the formless. I like it. I mean, this journeying practice that I'm on about, which is part of my art practice, is a form of temporal art as well. A question is posed or a purpose stated, drumming begins, and in a trance state the story unfolds, a lived-in story, which is kind of like this. And I'm not on about this film, I'm on about this, what you're in and all. And then you come back, there's a return, it finishes, and then we reflect. I guess it's practice research. The player, the fool in the play, will be the facilitator of this art, this poetry. The poet, slipping and dancing between characters and employing various means to make the journey. The show for the audience. It's this space where time bends. We're trying to open up. And it's not like this is anything new. Take the words once upon a time. Puts us in that space, into that state where our normal chronology does not apply. It's a mythic time. Frederick Jameson says that we are in need of a revival of the older pre-capitalist sense of time. Maybe to the Teutonic version, perhaps, of the change and flowing of all things, the great river of Tao, as Jameson puts it, to carry us downstream to the point of praxis. Oh, praxis, you say? Praxis, yeah. It's out of praxis that the archetypal structure emerges. Could you please go into praxis for me? But I was going to do that later. That's not now. That's not in my plan. I wrote this. I had a plan. This is not the designated time. This is not the designated time. It is not the designated time. It's not the designated time. Are you finished? Praxis. Alright. I am using the word here, praxis, in the sense found in Robin Nelson's book, Practice as research in the arts and beyond.
Praxis being the imbrication of theory and practice. Imbrication being a rather fancy, cool word for saying overlapping, like the scales of a fish. Practice here isn't the routines performed to perfect a skill. It is an evolving and growing investigation, research. I mean, personally, I might call it playtime! But Nelson's ideas resonate. In the journeying aspect of my whole practice I've mentioned, at first I read a fella called Runic John's book, Seda, Northern European Shamanism. This gave an initial framework for these experiences to occur through the practice of actually doing a thing, you know, which itself led to further development, primarily through reflective writing in a journal. Journaling is a key part of this process for me. In this project, practice research, praxis, allows me to look at the well from which my own models and ideas emerge.
Oh, that's so meta.
I agree with Nelson in his view that all thinking is embodied. Theory and practice are indeed imbricated in my own experience. In fact, as a little side note, the mind-body conundrum I think can be solved with language, and the word is minodi. Anyway, I digress. I've chosen to do this proposal in this manner for this reason, I guess. So instead of me only being in noggin land, theoretically writing about doing the thing, I'm actually exploring, researching, developing and practising my practice, whilst at the same time proposing a show in somewhat the manner it will be performed, because this is a performance. Being that I've shoved the camera in my face. The show will most likely have multiple characters played by the figure of the fool being me. Multiple characters, you know what I mean? Well, I know, I know, yes, I know. I know, context. I think about characters. Very confused. Why? Don't worry about it. Point is, out of this praxis has emerged what I'm calling an archetypal structure. It's like an inner world map for the embodied psychology of an individual. Good for life, also good for making characters. Huh? And I'm also interested in what else it can be good for, artistically. Here is a simple glyph that represents it all. At the centre cross point, we have the lover, our point of creation, right? And that central line is the axis of order. The king, which could be called any type of ruler to preference, but for me, it's the king. The king is our inner sense of authority. This is who I call the dog's body down the bottom here. Others might call this archetype the slave or the worker. And that's us sitting down to type the thing out, taking out the rubbish, performing the essential menial tasks that, if aren't done, make life disordered. Hence why I call this the axis of order. And over here, we have the warrior, the get it done energy. The part of us that pushes our boundaries forth and also defends ourselves and the ones we love. This is the poet who plays with creation, as described earlier. Some may also call this the magician. I call this the axis of creation. This is the priest, the researcher, could be called, the lecturer, the one who builds belief systems and shares them for the benefit of ourselves and others. And this is the prophet. This is largely our intuitive knowing and emotive intelligence. I call this the axis of helping. So there we have a structure, a pattern. Archetype has its meaning of original pattern, particularly in Jungian psychology, where these patterns are expressed in dreams, art, etc. And this has emerged from absorbing these books in particular. Yeah, during
playtime once, aka practice research, I did this. I drew a circle round it. And this is the fool. Without the structure, the fool easily becomes totally mad like a newborn baby. Without the fool, the structure loses its curiosity, playfulness, and can easily become an all-serious nooner lost up its own bumhole. Now, I'm aware I might have created a little bit of confusion in that earlier I spoke of the poet and the fool in the same identity, the same setting, the same role. But this is a work in progress, okay? And what I'm seeing actually is that much like in the tarot, which is another archetypal system for playing, the fool is 0 and journeys through the major arcana, like the magician, high priestess, etc., etc. And I like the fool, man, because I feel as well as us being Homo sapien, man the wise, or like Nelson refers to, Homo faber, man the maker, I really believe that primarily each one of us, every single human being alive, is Homo asinus, man the donkey, man the idiot, man the fool. Each of us is an idiot in our own beautiful way, right? And the sooner we accept that, better the world will be. In my opinion. But yeah, so here we have the player. The fool who will both create and move through the world of the play for and in collaboration with the audience. If anyone turns up, should do it.
Ralph Ellison said, "Some people are your relatives, but others are your ancestors. And you choose the ones you want to have as ancestors. You create yourself out of those values." Who is it I choose to be my ancestors? Well, I see values within my father and mother that are desirable in terms of ancestry, lineage. My mother is a creative and sensitive woman who has the rainy hills of North Wales pouring through her when she speaks. My father was a ridiculously artistic and courageous man who self-produced many artefacts from unfathomable depths. These artefacts have been some of my greatest teachers. So I begin here. I bear the surname Canwell. This name came to England under a banner with the Norman invasion of 1066. There is a village in Staffordshire named Canwell, as land was given to the family, no doubt for services rendered. The name comes from Normandy, which itself was established by who we now call the Vikings. Normandy originates in the term for these Northmen, whose tongue spoke Old Norse. Wales is inhabited by descendants of the ancient Britons. The Brythonic languages are Breton, Cornish, Welsh, Cumbric, Ivernic and Pictish. The last three have died out and are no longer spoken. The culture of the Welsh is rich with poetry. The country provides us with the earliest prose from Britain in the Mabinogion, a collection of stories compiled in the 12th to 13th centuries. As a result, I perceive ancestral lines running from myself off into the great well of what is, predominantly through the cultures of the Britons and the Norse. If I add to this my own artistic impulses, I am drawn toward the somewhat murky figures from both, known respectively as bards and skalds. These were the poets and performers of the day. However, this does not really convey the importance of the role that they held within society. See, there was no scribed aspect to what they did. These were cultures of oral tradition, and so these artists were therefore the keepers and shapers of cultural identity. They learnt, held, and added to the entire story of their people. The minds of these folk must have been absolutely incredible. Performative arts are intrinsically tied with the magical tradition of which bards and skalds are a part of. The real-time modification of consciousness in accordance with desire. And these powers have been extremely feared. If a bard cast a satire upon you, it could not only completely destroy your reputation in the eyes of society, your friends, and even yourself, but it could have people laughing at your absurdity for hundreds of years after your death.
What a numpty!
Gods such as Odin, Thoth, and Hermes were gods of magic and also poetry. In Norse mythology, the poetic mead, or mead of poetry, is a mythical beverage that whoever drinks shall become a skald or scholar able to recite any information and solve any question. Odin particularly resonates with my tastes, a god of possession, whether through berserker rage or utter poetic inspiration, which I view as represented by the mead. It is this mysterious and possessed state that I believe we now call flow state, a mode of being I see present in the artworks of the Paleolithic peoples painted upon cave walls, where this making and marking impulse was, in my mind's eye at least, performed with storytelling and song, all executed as one magical act, where the artist's emerging knowledge and revelation was shared with the members of the group so they too could experience blooms in consciousness. I believe we ought not sell ourselves short when placing ourselves as creators in lineage. We are juggling and playing with the very materials that make us human in the first place. The arts today indeed modify consciousness as they have always done, and in my view, this all begins with the consciousness explorations and resulting revelations of the artists themselves. This is the ancestry I chose as an artist, and I step proudly into this lineage. Examples of artists I particularly resonate with are Ivor Cutler, David Bowie, Tom Waits, Dylan Thomas, Salvador Dali, Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, Aleister Crowley, Gigi Allen, Susie Sue, Muddy Waters, Jonathan Kay, Philip Glass, Slava Polunin, Barrett and Levy, to name a few. Handprints on the wall. Water. Fire, story and song.
Okay, let's move on to the world, as you're saying. Could you please tell me a little bit about that?
Yep, so we have the player, the fool, who moves through a temporal piece of art called the world. This world that I am speaking of is the imaginal realm, which in this instance is the world of the show emanating from the performer, the player.
Emanating?
Yeah. Mimes are a great example of this. They work with imaginal moving images and project them outward and interact with them. It's not enough for it to be just a feeling. It has to be clear in every detail until the performer's body reflects the image in their action. Their belief is such to the point that the audience themselves perceive the invisible. Everyone together perceiving what isn't physically there. Just what the physical is implying is there. Imaginal realm. Emanation. It's a key theme of the show, actually. And I won't go into like full gory detail, but I have a couple of anecdotes that highly inform all of this. One being when I was alone on a dark path in the woods and I decided to dare Odin to come and play a trick on me. Odin! Come and play a trick on me then! And he did come and whoop my arse with an incredibly intense psychedelic experience where my dog, who I was walking at the time, who had never ever turned on me in any way, shape or form previously, bolted off when all of this trip was occurring. And when I found her, she was looking at me right in the eyes going... And it finished and I got home and reflected on my practice in my journal. And I come to the conclusion that all of this crazy stuff that I was perceiving as out there, was emanating out from me. I was both the source and the one completely overrun by an exhilarating ride in and through the imaginal realm. Hence why Jess the dog was looking at me right in the eyes. Odin played a trick. Another time, I was on a train to see my mum. We pulled in at Trowbridge, and I see a high-vis geezer on the phone, and on a bench was an old lady, and she went and started falling down the bench. Bloody hell. Bolted off the train, grabbed her, held her, supported her head and neck, and she was kind of in a slight fitty thing. Bloke looked at me and went, "Oh, good, thanks. Would you mind I've just got..." I was like, yeah, it's cool, it's cool. And when we were alone for that brief moment, she goes and dies in my arms. It was really, really weird. I was completely hypnotised. It was so peaceful. Then I realised she'd wet herself on my leg, and I snapped out of it, clocked what was actually going on, and went, "Breathe!" Just kind of punched her on the chest. She goes, and gets going again. Geezer comes back, people turn up, and the old palaver carries on like that. I end up getting back on the train and we just go off. Proper odd. Why I mention this here is that she stopped emanating. It's the only way I can describe it. The curtains closed. In the journeying aspect of my practice I mentioned earlier, which came out of a desire for these drug-free psychedelic experiences, the author of Seda, Northern European Shamanism, gives advice on making real when learning to walk in what we're calling the imaginal realm, which in the Norse tradition are the 9 realms of Yggdrasil, 9 spheres of consciousness that we can walk in. The traveller is not only encouraged to see the journey that unfolds, but to consciously engage every sense possible. Feel the soles of your feet on the dirt in Svartalfheim, land of the Dark Elves. Smell the air. Similar to what a mime does, no? Or maybe what you did when you were a child playing imaginative games before it all got so serious. I played with my wheelie a lot. Oh, right. Same here. Anyway, what these experiences I've just mentioned to you have shown me is we can emanate the imaginal realm and play with it, play within it, speak with it, learn from it. And this can be incredibly fun and be incredibly enjoyable for an audience, as proven to me by Mimes and Jonathan Kay. Emanation! I mean, these are all kind of previously quite occult ideas, hidden ideas, tacit notions that I'm making explicit. Little points threading together. Freddy, 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 blue, 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 Freddy, Freddy. Right, so let's stay on track, shall we? This is getting pretty long. So, what you're saying is, much like a mime does, you want to project out your imagination in this imaginal realm and create a theatre with it. Huh? Yep. Okay, I would say that's more of how, isn't it? So, I mean, what is this actual world you're trying to emanate going to be like? Weird. Well, I've made this kind of concept trailer actually, which I think will give you a real sense, a tangible feeling of the aesthetic.
The vibes! Here you go.
Beyond the identikit high streets, there is another Britain, a realm teasing at the periphery of human vision, where fairies, elves, and goblins still tread with purpose, where the landscape animates with the voice of mystery. Can you hear it? The mist of dreams talking riddles when you're half asleep. The twilight place where objects become subjects in their own right. Dancing, moving, feeling, speaking to you from the shadows. This is a tale from that very realm, of that very realm. This is Make Believe.
And what's happened is that from doing this trailer, I've begun to identify facets of investigation that I want to go into, right? Okay, but first, why do you say facet?
Well, it comes from a conception where research areas are viewed as constructed through combinations of facets. The analogy being that of a cut gemstone. It's really quite beautiful, really, because that leads to ideas of illumination and light refracting upon the central theme, problem, question, with a view to having flashes of insight. It originally comes from the social sciences. However, in this case, which, let's face it, is an artistic case, the central issue is the imaginal realm and how to play with it in performance, considering the player, the world, and the audience. So, in my rather pretty journal, we have music. I want to investigate rhythm and drones and explore different theories of music and look at rhythms and drones through a lens of mythology and ritual. And then consider how can I build these rhythms and drones that evoke this otherworld sense onto this extremely portable device called a Roland MC101. Because when I tour, and I want to tour, I'm probably going to have to get the Megabus. Next we got narrative text. I write the text and I want to explore ideas of story and in particular world construction. And I can turn to Alan Moore for this, who speaks of building entire ecosystems, entire worlds of being where these characters exist, and then the plot simply weaves a way through the world. I want to research perennial stories, the old myths, which seem to come back round and round and round again. Next facet, the player. I want to carry on investigating the archetypes. I want to put what I find into the player, into the system I showed you. And I've recently become interested in the Netters, the Egyptian gods, but information I am absorbing is showing me that perhaps there's been a mistranslation because our word for nature comes from Netta, and some people believe that these gods weren't gods but more universal laws, personifications of processes, natural processes, a kind of science told through story. Movement. I want to investigate movement and strength training whilst consciously engaging the imaginal realm. The other day I was doing shadow boxing. I switched the imaginal button and I became a black snake. I want to look for different textures of movement, rhythms. I want to explore Buto dance, a Japanese dance style that is all about the subconscious expression through the body. Improvisation. How can improvisation be embraced as a solo performer? Through the conception of the audience as collaborators? How can I have an improvisational sense when I most definitely want a full written script? So I want to investigate improvisational methods. And last facet number 6, visual poetry. How can I create visual metaphor throughout the show? So yeah, there's my journal. And after the show is done, and I'm doing a righty thing probably, and I move into a large reflection upon this major piece of work, I'm considering employing techniques of multimodal analysis to look at the results of these investigations, the manifestations of these facets, to see how they relate and talk to each other within the whole piece, and maybe discover meanings that weren't intended in the creation but are made from these different facets interacting. And I guess maybe I could use multimodal techniques and still use the analogy of facets, because I like the facets. I like the light inside. So, what do you think you could improve on to do the show? These facets, really. I guess from another angle, we could definitely say that they are points of pain. I want to be a better improviser. I want to be a better mover, more articulate expresser. I want to understand music at a deeper level, rhythm. So these investigations are also most definitely ways of me becoming, well, just becoming, I guess. And what qualifies you to be doing such a thing? What qualifies me to do such a thing? Well, in terms of art, I don't think we need any qualifications beyond the desire and the will to do it. But if you mean in terms of prior experience,
I went to drama school for a few years, left a bit early, and wrote a play called Tripping, which did pretty well. Sold out small venues on the south coast of England, and by happenstance went to Off-Broadway New York, which was a great adventure and taught me a lot. So yeah, I wrote that, I did the sound, but I wasn't performing in it. And I've tried a few times to create a solo theatre piece, and it's just gone, I'm gonna do it, I'll do it. Bit like that, really. Quite frankly, I wasn't obviously ready. Gigs have gone very well, playing and sharing my music. I've gone from bottling it outside open mics just over 2 years ago to headlining my first show and having mosh pits, which is bloody ass. But the move towards a theatre setting will allow for a different kind of attention to be played with, and more space to express and explore narrative in a nuanced way. Nuanced. And you're ready now. Well, let me tell you something, my will is unbreakable, and because of the liberating revelation that we are all human, it's not just me alone. Nobody is perfect. Everyone is a fool. You either see it or you don't. I feel pretty free to just get on with investigations, to get on with just making art without self-doubt and anxiety stopping me. To enjoy my inadequacies, I guess. It's funny, the archetypal structure that I want to make this show with, and the practices I've kind of touched on that I want to use to make the performance, are also the ones and things that have kind of got me to this point of just being alright with making stuff and having a good one. I mean, this is all quite a long way of me just saying I want to dick about on stage, basically. And have a right good time. Any last words? Punk. Last words. Just that, well,